We just met Wednesday, whatever.
We
recognize these. Wednesday, I slept with her. It's like, I literally texted her. I was gonna maybe text you. I just met Jose, you're something like so much. I don't know Jose. Yeah, he was, I guess he did this.
Well, I guess Eric talks
But
about
he must recognize me, I know it's. Heard his name. Jose this, I'm like, oh,
Well, sometimes Eric will show pictures of things and you. Oh, I'm sorry, make sure, because I think that was how I'm like, oh, that must be why they said that.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's funny, too. Such. And then I just had his.
Welcome everyone to our second session of Med Instead of Meds. And I'm just out of curiosity, has anybody here who's here for the first class, did you try any of the recipes?
Sorry, this is my first class.
That's your first one, okay. And you got the handouts from the first class, there's some extras back there. So make sure you get those before you get into.
I have a question on one recipes for the chickpeas. You substitute canned beans for that. How time do this fall? The name of the recipes about chicken fast.
Yeah.
How long did you do it?
You have to cook it long enough to get the peppers and tomatoes. I used canned in the tasting last time. I can't remember what I did. So maybe about half that time. The chickpeas hold up pretty well. So you can cook them, you know, don't worry about them getting too mushy. They hold up pretty well. If you wanted to speed that up, the other thing you could do was kind of pan fry your vegetables in a little bit of olive oil before you add it to the chickpeas, and then you could cook them for less. Any other questions from last time?
Do you do this once a month?
Pardon?
Do you do this on you talk on?
There's 6 sessions, or six topics. So yeah, so
We
we
just
did.
happened to find this. So I
Yeah.
didn't even know you did it.
Yeah, so we're doing, Wendy can fill you in on all of that. So this is, the session today is called Chasing Protein, so it's following a med way of eating, so each topic's a little bit different.
What class are we on? What is it?
This is called Change Your Protein, this is number two. Last week was an introduction, and so each time we'll review a little bit about the med way of eating. So you won't have missed a whole lot from the first session, really, that was just an intro. So this is kind of getting into the more detail of it. And so for those of you that are new, we do some tasting each time. And our recipes are not just like today, since we're talking about protein, we're not just getting protein foods. We're gonna do a mix of the med way of eating recipes each time. And so you could probably make it your lunch or a light lunch if you want to. So it'll be, you know, like again, a mixture of things. So today we're gonna be doing, it's a beef and mushroom taco with a corn salsa. And also Mediterranean lentil soup and autumn apple salad. And then I'm gonna just do a quick demo on how to prepare fish. To think about fish as fast food because it cooks very, very quickly. So that's what we're doing today. So there is a little bit of cooking involved. I'm gonna go through the slides really pretty quick. And then we'll get into the actual demo part. So if you have questions, though, just shout them out as we go. I'd rather do that. This is pretty informal. So we're going to get started here. I think. Right thing. There we go. Again, no? No? Oh, there we go. Okay. So we're going to be talking about eating the midway, which is a variety of things that are involved. It talks about eating, getting used to this clicker here. So eating lots and lots and lots of fruits and vegetables, that's part of the midway. Eating whole grains, eating beans and legumes, eating fish and seafood. Eating nuts and seeds, reducing solid fats, and also there is, we'll talk about part of the Mediterranean culture is to have a glass of red wine. So we talked about that a little bit last month. We'll talk about that some more. Also getting more physical activity is part of the Mediterranean way of eating, Mediterranean lifestyle. And then to socialize, they eat their meals with others, and so this is all part of like the med way of eating it, so it's not just about the food choices. There are other things involved as well. And they limit sugar, so it's a reduction in the amount of sugar in your diet. What sets the med way apart from other eating styles? Well, it's simple. It's very, we use simple foods like minimal ingredients generally. It's delicious, uses healthy fats, a lot of herbs and spices that add flavor, and makes the food delicious and craveable, and it's also satisfying. And because it's not a low fat diet, but it's a healthy fat approach to eating. And so there's a lot of whole grains also, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds. This helps with satiety, helps to keep you feeling satisfied. So that's part of the med way of eating. So how can you eat the med way? So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is the second, well, actually it's the first recommendation for eating the med way. Last time was more of an introduction. So we talked about it just in general about the med way of eating. So today we're going to talk about changing your protein and what that means, what's involved there. And the next session is on how to swap your fats from in America, we eat a lot of fat, but it's also unhealthy fat. And so we're going to talk about what are the healthy fats and how can we swap those out. Eating more vegetables, eating more fruit, snacking on nuts and seeds, making your grains whole whenever you can, and then rethinking your sweets. So that's the very last one. So again, just to review, these topics will be one per month. So these are the topics that are coming up. We will do points 3 and 4 together. So eating fruits and vegetables are put together into one class session. So today we're going to talk about changing your protein and what that means. It emphasizes in the med way that we eat primarily plant-based foods. They eat in the Mediterranean, and in the med style of eating, they eat a lot of plant-based foods. So what we're going to do today in our sampling is a kind of an easy way to get introduced to like beans and legumes. We're going to sample a Mediterranean lentil soup, which is very simple to prepare. And also in the tacos, the meat, the beef is used more for flavoring, and then there's mushrooms and veggies mixed in with that. So those are ways that you can think about using meat maybe more as a flavor and not necessarily just the star of a meal. We're kind of used to that in America. When you think about, a good example is we go to a steak restaurant and what do you get? Big steak that maybe fills half your plate or even more. And so we're really thinking about how to reduce those portion sizes. And I know it's a slow process. It's not something that you just convert to immediately, and to think about how can I reduce portion sizes perhaps, but still enjoy beef, choosing leaner cuts of meat, and then also incorporating them maybe into a stir fry or into a dish where you're using less meat, but then getting other types of plant proteins in there as well. In the med way of eating, they do limit red meat, and when they eat red meat, they choose the lean options. And so we'll be talking about that as well. Again, some tips. So we have limiting meat, beef, pork, and lamb. We limit or eliminate highly processed meat. That's another thing that's going to be a real challenge a lot of times for us in America. So I'm thinking about, there's a big football game tomorrow. And when you go to the concession stand, what are you going to find?
Hamburgers, brats, hot dogs.
What's that?
Hamburgers, brats, or hot
Hamburgers,
dogs.
brats, hot dogs, a lot of processed meat. Yeah, it's convenient, it's easy, all you have to do is heat it up. Yeah, we're used to that. So it is a mind shift on how can you look at doing something different? How can we look at making making that healthy choice easier for us? And so keeping that concept in mind. For poultry, they choose primarily white meat poultry. They eat more fish and seafood, part of the med way of eating, increasing plant proteins like beans, nuts, and seeds. And There's also dairy and eggs. We'll explore that a little bit later. They don't eat as much dairy. Not that it's not okay to, but that is just part of the med way of eating. So this is a chart that I really like to use and to make it a little bit more easy to understand. It's the protein choice continuum. So on the one hand, you have the suggestion to eat more of beans, nuts, and seeds, and eat more of fish and of white meat, poultry. And then you get towards maybe eating a little bit less eggs and dairy and lean meat, and then dark meat, poultry, and higher fat dairy, higher fat meat, and highly processed meat. And so looking at that continuum, there are a number of reasons to try to avoid that highly processed meat, which is, actually, quite honestly, that's a pretty hard sell because we like that processed meat in this country. And so we're gonna be talking about that as well.
Is the dark meat poultry just the fat level? Is that the main difference?
Primarily. So let's talk a little bit more about limiting meat amounts that they suggest recommending no more than 2 to 3 times per month. Well, that seems pretty extreme for us, right? So you might want to scale that back. Think about what you're doing right now. How can you make some substitutions? How can you maybe look at starting by reducing the amount of meat that you eat by maybe a third and see how that feels? And then reduce it down further. You're not going to be happy if you just give it up all at once. I can tell you that, if you're used to eating meat. I remember my brother raises purebred Angus cattle. And so for years, and my dad was a dairy farmer, so I grew up in a dairy farm, been around agriculture all my life. And my brother says, well, what do you tell people? And I said, well, I tell them to eat less. But interestingly for my brother, he had high cholesterol and triglycerides running in my family. And so when he's a pretty healthy guy, doesn't want to take any kind of medications. And so he was able to keep his health in check by reducing the amount of red meat that he eats. He doesn't even eat red meat himself. He buys bison and eats it. So there's, it's one of those things that you can make a recommendation, but you also have to think about what's right for you. And I think we could all agree that we could stand to eat less of red meat in this country. And choosing the way that we prepare it. There's a lot of things involved. It's not just saying eat less red meat. Think about how you cook it, how you prepare it, and how often you eat it, how much you eat at one time. So there's a lot of things that factor in. They also recommend eating more fish and eating more plants. And so rather than thinking that I'm going to give up beef or pork, think about I'm going to eat more fish and go from that approach. What are you going to have more often instead of what are you going to have less often? And then it won't feel like you're trying to limit yourself as much. So one of their med tips is to replace half of your ground meat in your recipes with vegetables. So that's what we're going to sample today is the mushroom and beef taco. And also you can do that with burgers. You can do that really easily with spaghetti sauce. Have just a little bit of ground meat in there and throw in some lentils, another veggies. Those veggies really add to the flavor. And just think about ways that you can make some changes. So the recommendation that I really want you to take with you from this to start with is to really limit, to greatly limit or eliminate highly processed meats, and then use bacon just as flavoring in recipes instead of eating just bacon for bacon. And so one way you can make bacon stretch longer is you get it home from the store, take a strip of bacon, roll it up, put it in a bag, and then you freeze it so then you can take out just one strip at a time, and you won't have to have a whole package of bacon in your refrigerator that you think, well, it's there, I might as well cook it up. But you've got it in the refrigerator, it's there for those recipes when you want to add some flavor. When I do have bacon, I also trim out a lot of that fat, which I know a lot of people like to eat, but I don't. I like just a little bit of bacon flavor. So those are some things that you can do to start thinking about how can I still get some satisfaction from something I really like. And bacon is often used in recipes as a flavor enhancer, but then you won't have as much bacon there. So you're still getting the flavor, but just not as much of it. And to change your protein, to choose white meat poultry, such as turkey and chicken. They recommend eating that at least twice per week. And you can cook enough chicken, like when you, let's say that this is still grilling season, I love to grill. And so I'll grill some extra like chicken breasts and then have them to put on top on salads, to make, make other things with them. You can add them into casseroles or even then throw it into your stir fry at the very end because the chicken's already cooked. And so anytime that you're loading up your grill or using your grill, load up a little extra and plan ahead for that. And so that'll make it more accessible for you. So we think about the midway of eating, eating less meat in general as being healthy for the planet as well as healthy for you. So talking about fish and how you can eat fish 2 to 3 times per week. And one of the things I'm going to demonstrate for you here at the end of class is how to just do a simple fish in a fry pan with some olive oil and seasoning. And I call fish fast food. It's the meal that I go to when I know I don't have much time to cook. I can go home and I don't know, I'm not making a promotion for Dillon's or anything, but they do have those little packages for $5 where you can get 2 fish fillets. And so we're going to sample catfish and tilapia here today. And so have those, you can have them in your freezer. They're easy to thaw really quickly. And just put them in the frying pan, put a baked potato in the microwave, and then have a green salad and you've got a meal in way less than 30 minutes. And so think about fish as being fast food. It doesn't take long at all to cook. Another thing we're going to be talking about today, if you don't already have one in your kitchen, you need a food thermometer. Because oftentimes what we do is we want to make sure it's done. And you do want to make sure it's done. That's what people think of food thermometers for. But really the food thermometer is for quality. Because a lot of times we overcook things and then they don't taste as good. Like you can cook it just to the right safe internal temperature and the quality is good, plus it's safe. It's probably the one thing that I have an extra one a new one in a package in case I have to drop this. I just don't know how I cook without a food thermometer. So use it for all types of meat, casseroles, reheating leftovers, what have you. So we're going to be talking about that too. There is another recipe that's one of my favorites. It's the basil shrimp tomato pasta with feta. It's on the Set of Meds website. We are going to sample that in the future. If you want to get a head start on it, it's a wonderful recipe. And then the fish taco with avocado mango salsa is also really good. So that's another way you can have fish. You can have a salmon burger. You can have just a simple fish fillet. You can have the basil shrimp and tomato pasta. The fish taco with avocado and mango salsa. You got all kinds of variety of flavors right there. And these all represent the midway of eating also with fish and seafood. So to think about how you can incorporate more fish into your diet, you can think about having salmon Saturdays. That's another one of my favorite meals. And I know some of you, I mentioned I had a Ukrainian family that lived with me for a little over 2.5 years. They're still here in town, Antonina Works University. But when they came, finding foods that the kids liked, kid-friendly food, and things that were easy for them to cook. One of the favorite meals that we all enjoy together would be salmon that I either do on the grill, wrap it in foil or in the oven. And then another one I'm going to demonstrate in the future for you is orzo pasta. And just a simple side you can make with that. And then again, add a nice big green leafy salad to it. And the kids absolutely love it. So I'm hoping that my little guest chef, Max, who's 13, will come and demonstrate some cooking for you in the future. He wants to do that. So some things to look forward to. So common questions that people have about eating eating about fish, eating the midway is, do you have to eat fish in order to eat the midway? Some people just really don't like fish. No, you don't have to, but it is a really good option. What can I do about fish being expensive? Well, you can look for sales for one thing. You can use canned fish, tuna, salmon, and then using that as a way to stretch that food dollar. And then what about mercury, or is farm raised fish okay? So you can, people have those kinds of questions. We'll go on to the next slide and talk a little bit about. So to make the fish less expensive, you can choose canned. You can watch sales and coupons, and you'll be replacing other meat with fish. And meat in general is a little bit more of a pricier item at the grocery store. So sometimes that switch really isn't that much different in cost. And so what about mercury? Generally, don't let the fear of mercury stand between you and eating the fish. The most common fish and seafood eaten in the United States present very little risk from contaminants like mercury, while offering many health and nutrition benefits. And so many of the fish that are commonly consumed that are low in mercury include salmon, pollock, oysters, shrimp, catfish, clams, scallops, flounder, cod, crab, crawfish, squid. So there's a lot of fish there. As you can see the list that is considered to be low in mercury. However, if you're pregnant or you have small children, you need to be really careful about mercury. So that's the exception. Pregnant women and small children should eat a variety of low mercury fish, and should really be careful about the fish that might have mercury in them. And so you don't want to eat these high mercury fish right here that are listed on the slide. That's also on your handout on the back. So what's better, farm raised or wild caught? Generally, they say it's impossible to give a sweeping statement about whether farm raised or wild caught is better. It depends on the specifics of the seafood item being purchased and how it was produced. But consumers need to be savvy regarding the specific fish and seafood items they purchase and make informed decisions. So there can be both good and bad, farm raised and wild caught options. And the main thing is to look at the options on and to check on. There's some resources online that you can check for where you can find out more about how the fish that you're eating is raised. That should be on your handout as well. Hopefully, I believe it is. And so next we're going to move on to changing your protein with plant-based protein options. And generally these are handy to have on hand because they store very well, very easily. And also they're lower in calories. And so they're a great way to improve your health and help maintain your weight, a healthy weight. And so here are some ways that you can go, what they call GoMed life hacks. So we think about cooking like dried beans and peas. Those take a long time to cook. So you can cook those all in a big batch, divide them up into the amount that you'd maybe find in a can of beans, because that's how a lot of recipes are. You want to keep those amounts consistent. And so then just package them up. They freeze really well, and then keep them frozen to use when you want to pull out a can of beans or lentils. But lentils cook very quickly. You can cook them in bulk to use the next few days, again, or freeze for later use. And so on the Med Instead of Meds website, there are a lot of instructions for how to cook beans and legumes and how to freeze them and use them in different ways. So the examples they have up here, lentils with cumin vinaigrette, the quinoa pinto bean burger, and the white bean hummus. I've only tried the white bean hummus of these options here, but there's a lot of options on the Med Instead of Meds site. If you're a beginner with using the dried beans and legumes, lentils are a great place to start. So we are sampling the Mediterranean lentil soup today. Lentils don't require any soaking time. They have a short cook time. There are a lot of varieties, types, and colors. We have just the standard lentil, but I kind of like the red lentils myself. Those are sort of my favorite, the difference you can do with those. And so, again, just a great way to get started. Also, canned beans are perfectly fine and they fit more within our lifestyle. So what to remember with any kind of canned beans, I always rinse them, get as much of that sodium off as you can, and then you can throw garbanzo beans, kidney beans, whatever, into salads, into all kinds of things that can add some extra protein and fiber too, and nutrition. Canned beans are a good option, especially if you're new to beans. And then again, the tip to rinse them before removes about 30% of the sodium. Cooking dry beans, you can cook them in a slow cooker or pressure cooker, or just on your stove, and again, package them up and freeze for later. Easiest way to cook a bag of dried beans is to soak it for 48 hours, drain and rinse them, put them in a slow cooker with vegetable or chicken stock and water, and then cook to 8 to 10 hours on low. And so that's an easy way to do beans in a big batch. Then you again got them ready for later on. So why don't people eat more beans? Well, they say that it gives them gas. So one of the things that you can do for beans to relieve that issue, soak the beans for 48 hours, not just overnight. So soak them that longer time frame. Change the water once while you're soaking. Rinse the beans really well after you're soaking them. Cook them until they're very soft, and then keep fully covered with water while they're cooking. So that'll help remove some of that, what's causing that issue. Also, when you're eating beans, you need to chew them well, help your body digest the beans, reduce gas, and add beans slowly into your diet. Don't just all of a sudden start eating a lot of beans. So just introduce them slowly into your diet, your body will adjust. You can add some spices that aid digestion. One thing, add salt late in that cooking process, and then rinse them well. If you're using the canned beans, make sure that you rinse those well. So you have a pot of beans in your refrigerator, or you have a can of beans in your pantry. What are you going to do with those? We've already talked about some of them. Add them to salads, make beans and rice, hummus or other bean spread, burritos, tacos, side dish. The great thing about beans is they double as both a protein food and as a vegetable. So beans can be double duty. And then beans are wonderful in soup. You can add them to all kinds of soup. And enrich the fiber and the flavor and the protein in soup. What about vegetarian options? If you're a vegetarian and eating the Medway. So eating vegetarian is consistent with the Medway of eating because the Medway incorporates a lot of fruits and vegetables and produce. The protein in the vegetarian version of the Medway, as you know, would come from other sources such as beans and legumes. Sometimes fish and seafood is one way that you get those omega fatty acids. So that would be something to consider. Tofu is a possibility as far as adding both some protein and such. So there also are fortified foods that you can add if you're wanting to go vegetarian. And then what about dairy and eggs? So the traditional Medway of eating is not real high in dairy, 1 to 2 servings per day. They usually get a lot of that in yogurt or in cheese. They have milk in small amounts and eggs. I've been in Extension long enough. I remember the time when we were telling people, oh, don't eat eggs. No, don't eat the egg yolk. It's too high in fat. Well, now nutrition's progressed, so we know eggs are good for you, and you can enjoy them without guilt. At least up to 7 eggs per week. So So it's kind of one of those things that goes back and forth, but you can enjoy eggs. They're a great option for a quick, easy protein to add to lots of different foods. And they're a really great protein for older adults that may not have, that may have some difficulty chewing because they're easily to chew, easy to digest. So eggs are not the bad guys anymore. So taking some steps again to change your protein, that we talked about a lot of these. Changing your protein is in one of the most impactful dietary changes you can make toward eating the med way. And so I encourage you to think about how you might do that for yourself. What would work for you? We're gonna talk just briefly about mindful eating. Mindful eating means eating with awareness, awareness of what's on your plate and the entire eating experience, being present in the moment. So that's kind of contrary to what we do in this country. We're eating on the run a lot. Think about how many drive-thrus and fast foods that we have. We eat in our cars. We eat at our desks. We don't take that time to savor having a meal to really appreciate the food or the company that we're with. So think about mindful eating. Not only good for allowing, you're likely to eat better, have better choices, make better choices about food, but also giving your body time to digest that as you're eating. So how can you adjust to a more mindful way of eating? You can set aside at least 30 minutes to plan and make a list of what kinds of main dishes and side dishes you'll want to have that week. And then use some of the Medway recipes. I've incorporated with the Medway recipes a number of things that I've tested over the years as part of our Walk Kansas program, which really follows a lot of the Medway of eating as well. So I've added in some things for you and also things to maybe make it a little bit more palatable to start shifting toward the Medway of eating that might, that you might be more apt to try. You want to keep things simple. There we go. You want to select recipes that have just a few ingredients. So when you have a lot of ingredients, unless you have the time, it really is time consuming. Choose recipes you feel comfortable preparing and then use simple cooking techniques. So that's what the kind of things that we're sampling here today through these classes are pretty simple to do. And don't require anything really special in terms of equipment and such. So for ingredients, they're easy ingredients to find. Some med tips there. One of your handouts should be on kitchen staples that you can have at home to make med way of eating a little bit easier if you have those things on hand. So, and also checking what you have before you purchase additional. And include the basics, and these are really the staples that are on that list. You want to keep it interesting, and you want to get your family involved in that process. Of course, having things that you know that they're going to appreciate. Use foods that are in season, and then maybe trying one new recipe a week to see, what your family might enjoy. Between our first class and this class, I got married. I was a widow for about 4 years. My first husband was a foodie. And shortly after we got married, he made the comment, he said, it would be great if we just tried a new recipe every day at every meal. I'm like, you may need a new wife if you find a new recipe every single time. But he was always flipping recipes and did a lot of cooking too and tried things. And so it was fun because he expanded my interest as well. And so a lot of times though, I find that people don't want to try new recipes. They just want to stick with what they think is tried and true. So a challenge that I'm gonna give you is to try at least one new recipe a week. And I've given you 4 options today, so you could pick something that you think your family might enjoy. But to expand on, that there are some things that you and your family like, but try maybe a new way of preparing a particular type of food, or if you know that you like Mexican food or Italian, try a new recipe that would fit in with that flavor profile. Some things to just keep in mind when you're planning, this is what they call a healthy eating plate in the Mediterranean version. It's very similar to the My Plate that USDA is known for and that promotes. So we think about taking your plate and splitting it in half. Half of it is fruits and vegetables. The other half you'll have whole grains in a portion, for perhaps even a starchy vegetable, and then you'll have your protein option. And so that's what like a healthy plate would look like. I remember, again, been around a while. I remember when they came out with what they called the New American Plates, where the plate used to look like half your plate was a steak or was meat. So then we transitioned to a healthier American plate, which it decreased that protein portion. And then what they called the New American Plate was like a stir fry that only had meat mixed in with all the veggies. And so it's kind of interesting that we're still trying to move toward that plate that has meat where it's not the star of the meal. You know, thinking about letting those veggies be the star of that meal, or even a really nice dish with whole grains in it. This is another thing that I think we need to be, that can really help with our meal planning, is to plan for leftovers. We call them plandovers. Think about ways to use the particularly like grains and proteins that you've cooked once. How can you reuse those, either in a soup or in a stir fry, and lots of different ways that you can reuse those foods or make them a little different so that it doesn't feel like you just have the same thing over and over throughout the week. One of the things that we used to do, my foodie husband and I, was to keep, we have maybe a spoon or two of veggies left, or you'd have some rice left, and we keep adding into a container in the refrigerator those little bits of leftovers, and then we'd make a soup, and it would be really, really good because it'd be a little different each time. And one of the things with the soup recipe today, which is one reason why I chose it that's a little bit different, is that it includes at the very end of the cooking process a vinaigrette that you mix in with the soup, which really infuses it with a lot of flavor. And so this vinaigrette has a 3/4 of a cup of fresh basil leaves that's packed in. So it's a lot of basil I have growing in my yard, so it was easy for me to get to basil. Some olive oil, some fresh parsley, a little bit of red vinegar, and then you put that in a food processor and you grind it all up, and that's a really intense flavor infusion into that soup right at the end. But you can use that vinaigrette or that concept with soup in general if you feel like, boy, it's just kind of lacks something, doesn't have a lot of flavor. So think about that as an option of how you can make that, dial up that flavor profile a bit. But lots of ways that you can use, instead of leftovers, think of them as planned overs. And so you may even cook extra in mind to use them planned over again in a different way later in the week. Again, just some tips to organize your pantry and your refrigerator, your freezer, so it makes that meal preparation a little bit easier. And you probably know the first in, first out rule. You buy more supplies to move those that have a shorter shelf life left to the front, and add your fresher ones to the back. Just again, a little reminder of that. And be mindful about your meal planning and your food buying and food preparation. Be realistic about how much time that you're willing to give to food prep. And that's always been a hard one for me, because I do like to cook. I never really allow myself enough time, so I'm feeling kind of rushed. Healthy eating is a continuum. It's not an absolute. So you can think about choosing healthy-ish options over non-healthy options. So we talked about what some of those non-healthy options might be, like the processed meats, the processed food. So think about what would be more healthy-ish over that. So you could perhaps cook up a turkey breast and have your own cooked turkey breast there for sandwiches instead of purchasing the deli turkey meat. So that would be a way to make a substitution there. On the Medicine Wes website, there's a meal planner and shopping list. If you'd like to utilize that, you can just download it or just go ahead and print off of it. And so you start with, the days of the week that you might have a little bit more time to devote to food prep and plan to have meals that you take a little bit more of your time to prepare. On the nights you're gonna be short on time, pick the planned over options, or like I said, the fish fast food option. And then find your family standards. You can, we've heard about meatless Mondays. If that works for you, great. Or salmon Saturdays, whatever works for you and your family, what kind of flavor profiles you like, and go with that. So now we're gonna go into the recipes. And these are ones on the Minnesota Men's website that are available, but I chose this mushroom beef taco. This one we're gonna sample today. And then the Mediterranean lentil. So if I could have, Wendy and Jennifer, do you wanna grab the stuff out of the refrigerator? And then I'm gonna bring the crock pots in. I'm gonna get the frying pan going here. And I'm gonna add that vinaigrette to the soup so we can warm it. And we'll be ready to sample that. This is my first time using this little frying pan, so hopefully. Well, the light's supposed to come on. Yes. Ah. There we go. Yes, okay. Let that heat up.
See now, then yeah. That's great too. So it's like sort of it's like. Yeah, do like a version of chop or something. My cousin really has double.
It's doing that, we'll get the fish going here. Now with fish. There are lots of ways that you can season fish. So the ones that my favorites are blackening seasoning or lemon pepper. Of course, there are also like seafood seasonings. There's like a Mediterranean, like a Mediterranean citrus blend. So there's just all kinds of different seasonings you can put on fish. So are there any preferences in the group today? Preferences? Keeping this pretty simple. I will oftentimes oil just whatever the food is I'm putting like on a grill instead of oiling the pan. So I'm gonna do a blackening on the tilapia for one. We'll use different seasonings. That way you can try different ones you like, or choose which one you want. And I'll do lemon pepper. Lemon pepper is more mild, it just gives a little bit of a. You don't really taste lemon, it gives it just kind of a nice light. Flavor. And a little bit of pepper. You guys hungry? Like pick them all up? Huh? Okay. While that is cooking, we have the autumn apple salad that's in your recipes. I'm experimenting to see how the recipe calls for a fourth of a cup of sugar in the dressing, so I'm reducing that, seeing what works and what doesn't. So if this is about half that, so we'll taste it today and see what you think. And you might not need all of this dressing for the salad. This is one of my favorite salads, and this time of year, apples are so good, so I use just a Honeycrisp apple in the salad. The recipe does call for a Granny Smith and a Gala, I think. But you can use whatever kind of apples you like. Well, yeah. So when you use a food thermometer, I like the InstaFreeze because the food sensor is in the tip of the thermometer. If you use the dial thermometer, you need to look and see where there's a little dimple in the stick to see that's the food sensor. So when you put that into your food, you have to get that dimple part into the thickest part of the food. And so I think these are a lot easier to use because that sensor's right in the tip. Otherwise, you have to stick that thermometer in quite a ways, like on a burger, to get it to the where it's that dimples in the middle of the thickest part of the food. So I think we're gonna be pretty close here. So for fish, we want it to be 145 in the center, at the thickest part of that meat or the fish. We're close, we're not quite there. Just about 4 minutes. So if you wanna come on up, and get your plate. Let's see, the easiest way here, do this. Okay, so we have salad, we've got the soup. We need to work around the bay leaves. We've got tacos with the corn salsa. That was. And then we'll have you come on and grab a plate. Ready? I know. I don't need it anymore. No. Sorry, these cups are big for this soup. You want to serve? Yep, I can do that. I will serve the fish and let me know what kind you want. If you want to try a couple of them, that's fine too. Got plenty?
Yeah.
Do you have a particular type to write? Flavor? Well, you don't have that, so we don't have any for. Yay! Those more. Maybe right, that's the lemon pepper on that one. Wow.
So on behalf of Human Resources, we want to thank Carolyn again for research assistance for providing this wonderful cooking demonstration, eating healthy to everybody. And this is our second one, and we have 4 more, that's a part of this committee. And if you didn't get an opportunity to register and participate, we still have time. And so those who are on Zoom, again, I want to thank you for zooming in and taking part, and the food smells so good. I wish there was here. And maybe next time you'll be able to participate in the person. Again, I'm Wendy Nicholson, with Human Resources, and we just want to thank Sherlyn, Michael Jackson, Research and Extension, for doing this for us today. It's really great places.
I like you to, Key West is a favorite destination. We go out every year, there's a restaurant called Palms Bread. I go to good San Francisco, it's just San Francisco. Please, I've never eaten Palms Bread. It's Palms Bread.
I wish I was thinking everyone got right out of it. Free food. It's great thing. $30 change tunas. You bet. Do
You like the catfish?
a small pieces. I'm just looking at some cake.
Ian, are you planning to eat?
Yeah, that's what it was really good. So there's a fantastic guys out there for Oh, no, it's that shit. It's on job. Paid for the lot.
I did.
Yeah. That's a really good place.
Are you having some?
So what do you think so far?
Actually, great.
Okay, what's your favorite?
Haven't had everything.
Okay.
Hard to make. Not good.
So is the salad
Not
dressing,
really.
is the salad dressing
Yeah.
okay? So that's half, yeah, that's half the amount of sugar, so you wanna make a note on your recipe that you cut that in half.
Olive oil. Bunch of fruit stems, spices, dill. Those are the three that I always use to make small cookies. Sometimes I put tarragon in it, that's nice. Avocado, mashed out really well.
You obviously like the coffee?
Yeah, it's top. Oh, yeah.
Top lid.
Yes, our director, my director, they will be the foodie. Yeah.
So do you want to put it in the blender?
No, I just mash it up really well and then stick it in the mason jar. And then when it separates, when I take it for lunch, I just shake it up really well and put it in the